All right, so we're back. Sorry, my computer crashed. Okay, so the problem we had here is that if I add this cats array here, or cats dependency here, it's going to re-render constantly because cats change because I changed the state up here. I set cats. So we don't want that. I want to have it like this so it doesn't re-render every single time I update a cat because it's just going to be an infinite loop. So one more thing about set state. These setters here. We have used it so far with this, where I just call the function directly with whatever I want to update it to. Another way of doing it is you can add, if you give a callback function here, and I say last state, instead of having to use the cats variable, when I set the state, it can instantly give me the last state. So I can just return here, last state, concat file. It's the same thing that I do here. I just use the setter directly to get the last, I give it a callback function, which will give me the last state. So I don't have to use the variable up here. And that means when I don't use this variable, let's remove it, the error we see here with the missing dependency cats, because now I no longer use it, I just use the setter, and React is not going to be worried about that because that's only created one time. So that already exists. So we can use the state, get last state, and then return a new state. A new state would be an empty array, for instance. In this case, I just say last state concat and then the file. I could also say last state push file and then return last state. It's the same thing. It's better general to use concat. So it returns a new array with the current array plus the file I just added. Let's try the console log to see it. So we have our cats, and we see first it renders twice with an empty array, then it renders twice with the one cat that we found. I want to have a button where I can add more cats. So like add cat. So we already have a function to add a cat. I call that add cat, which calls the API, gets one cat, updates the state. So we can just use that directly. So unclick, add cat. So when I click this here, it's going to be a second cat. You see there's 2 items now in the array. Click it again, it's going to be 3 items in the array, and so on and so on and so on. Okay, so what we have is the function that calls the API. I use callback to make sure that it doesn't get recreated every time because I need to listen on this function. I need to use that function inside use effect, so I need to add it to the dependency array. So we want to make sure that it doesn't get re-rendered constantly. By giving this use callback with the function that I created, and I have an empty array here, the empty array means that it will only run once when the component mounts. So this function is never going to be updated. So when the component mounts, it's going to create the function. It's going to use the effect. I'm going to listen to when the function changes. We know it only changes one time. So it's going to add the first cat when it mounts. I have the button that can also call the function to add more cats. So let's just try to output the cats we have. Going to make use cats. I'm going to use map. Going to iterate over the array. Each iteration saves a variable for the current cat that it found. I'm going to return an image because it's an image string. And we're just going to see what that looks like. So now we render, it found a cat, and it renders the image. I click my add cat button, renders a second image. It's quite big. Let's just add some width so it doesn't get so massive. Oh, that was the button. There we go. So it has one image here. Give us a break. There we go. I can remove this text as well. So it loads, gets one image. I click add cat. There's a second one, third one, so on and so on. Okay. So now we want to have one more thing. We want to have, as you can see, when the page loads, there's a little bit of a delay. before the first cat comes up. So good thing now this is cats. It's probably not a big deal, but we're going to do it anyway. So we can have something called loading state. Like we will have some kind of, normally you would have a little spinner, or we will have a text called loading, something like that. Let's add that. So we're going to make, because loading is a dynamic thing, it loads or it doesn't load, we're going to use state for that. Let's just call it is loading, set is loading. I'm going to use state again. And we want it to be loading by default. Because we know it fetches one cat when it loads, we will assume that it's the default state of loading is true. So it is loading when it first mounts. So, and then we have our setter. We know the thing that loads is this API request. Let's just try first to just add this down here. I'm going to say if loading. So if loading is true, we're going to show a little span, a div. Let's just make it a div called loading. Could be an image or something, but now it's just this loading tag. So you'll see here loading, and then the image shows up. Because we never update the state here, it's just set to true, so it's just going to be loading constantly. So what we want to do, for instance, is here, before we do our API request, we will set loading to true. When the API request is done in here, we will set loading to false. Let's try it again. So now when it loads, so it's at loading true. Let's do it again. So it says loading, and then when the image comes back, it doesn't load anymore. So when I click add cat, it's going to be loading again. It's going to be really fast, but you can see it just pop up. And this could, of course, be nicer. You could make some more design or something with it, but it's a good way, normal way of doing it when you have API requests inside a React component, that you have some kind of state variable, in this case a Boolean, that just says whether it's loading or not. And then you can use that inside your React component to show some kind of loading state. Okay. Let's just, for the sake of the next example, we're just going to make a component. We're going to make a new component. We're going to call this the addCat component. So we're going to take this button here and this behavior here we have with the API. Oh, actually, it's going to get too complicated. We're just going to make a new component here. Let's go here and make a component called my name. It's going to talk about something called prop types. So we're going to import React. It's better to just keep it separate. We're going to make a component called my name. It's going to have props, so we might as well just add that right away. And we're going to say return div my name is, and we're going to export default my name. Default. Okay, so inside my app, I'm just going to import this new component that I made. Import my name from my name. Let's just put this at the top so these cat images don't push it all the way down. My name prop types example. So we're going to do this. So my name is Mass and age is, I'm just going to do an integer, 38. Okay, so I have my name, I initialize it, I give it two props, one called name, one called age. So in here, I have my props array. We can get those two variables out, name, age. And we're going to say props, and we're going to say my name is, my name is name, break, and my age, let's just put age. Let's do another break. So this is going to be a very basic component. It just says my name, and we have this prop types example. My name is Mass, age 38. And we already know that I can change these. So if I say I'm 14, it's going to change this variable here to 14. Okay, so we have something called prop types. Let's keep my console. Prop types used to be included in React, but it's not anymore. But we're still going to cover it because it's very commonly used. So I install my prop types dependency. npm I prop types, prop dash types, and we're going to save that. So when I run this command, I assume you've already seen it in previous classes. It will find the prop types. I know it's called this. You could find it on the internet. It's an official, it's made by Facebook as well as part of the React library. It's just not included in the React library anymore. So it's going to install this anytime now. Okay, but prop types, there we go. So now we just need to start the app again. Prop types is a way to make sure that whatever I pass in, these two props here, are correct. So we can use prop types library as a way during development only to give us a warning if we make mistakes. So it'll be easy to see once I code this up. So I write this import prop types from prop types. That's the dependency I just installed. And then every React component has a way of defining which props it takes. So if you have 100 components, 1,000 components, something like that, if you build these prop types into it from the beginning, when a new developer joins the team or you join the team, you'll be able to just read the component and see what props it takes. So you don't have to actually read through all the code. So it's called my name, the same name as the component, dot prop types with a lowercase p in this case. You see I imported with an uppercase p. And then we can say, I know I have this name and age. So we have name, and you can use prop types. So prop types has a ton of different ways you can define what they are. One of them is called string. So I will say name is a string. I know my name is a string. I can say age is a number. It's called integers normally, but in prop types it's called number. So let's just save that. And you will see here, what did my console go? There we go. You will see here that it doesn't change anything. Let's just remove these console logs. I don't need those anymore. And we had this, you can see here each child in the list should have a unique key prop, which we've seen a couple times already. We know the URL to the image is unique, so I'm just going to give it that as a key. And that error is going to go away. And then the says image elements must have an alt prop. That's true. So we're just going to give it a blank alt. Alternate text, the thing you use when you hover an image. There. So that error is going away. So now I know errors. Let's go back to the example. Okay, so it didn't change anything this, but let's try to change this. So instead of age as a number, integer, I passed in here, I'm going to say mass here as well. So this is obviously a developer error. This is not a proper age definition. So now it will give us a warning. Failed prop type, invalid prop of age of type string supplied to my name, expected number. So that's because here we told the component what to expect of the props that it receives. We could add more. This is what I call test string. Let me just redo this. So now the error is there. If I make it back to a number, it's not going to give that error anymore. One more thing you can do is you can set, let's just say test is required. So if you add is required, it's also going to give you a warning. Failed prop type test is marked as required in my name, but its value is undefined. Because I didn't give it a test prop, and I told it in here in my definition that that is supposed to be a string and it is required, it's going to fail. It's not going to fail. It's going to give you a warning, a developer warning. You probably messed something up. I probably messed something up. One other thing, let's just try to take the test. Let's just keep doing the age and name. So that's prop types. And there are more than this. There are also, we could have, if we had an onClick, we could say prop types function, or func. For instance, you could have prop types array. I'm not going to go into this. You can go really deep into this. There's also one called prop types array, prop types object. And you can also define what objects are supposed to look like, what keys it's supposed to have, and all these things. We're not going to go too much into the details. about prop types, and you can Google prop types. You can find all this on Google, and you can say my name default props, and you can define the same. So default, let's just say mass, and default age is 100 years old. And default function is just a default, like blank function, for instance. So if these are not required and they're not set, it will look at these default props and it will give those. So let's just say John instead. Don't have to use this. So now I have the default props is John Doe, who's 100 years old. So it's still going to say mass and 23 because I passed those props in here to the my name component. But if I remove them, it's now not going to receive those props and it's going to say John Doe 100. So you might have, well, pretty commonly actually, you have components that receives props, but not all props need to be required. Some props can just have a default value. So if you want to override it, you can. If you don't override it, it will go back to the defaults and it will just show those as props. So if I don't type anything in now, it's going to be John Doe age 100. If I just type in my name, it's going to be mass age 100 and so on. So prop types, default props. You need to install this dependency here, which is an official Facebook dependency for React, to enable this, to be able to write these. Other than that, it's all already configured inside React. You just need to import this library. Okay, so that was prop types. One last example. So the last thing we're going to cover today is something called children. Going to make a new component again. Children component. Let's just call it children. And I import React from React. I have to do this every time. It's going to call this let's just call it children example. And we have our props if we need them. And we're going to return some kind of div here. A div with some content. Export default. And then we're going to import that just like I did with the other ones inside this app that I use for I just called the file children. I'm just going to import it as children example. You realize the file was called children. You don't need to name the same things. It's probably good practice to do it. Maybe I should just do it. I'm just going to rename the file. It's good practice the file is named the same as the component. It makes it easier to find the stuff in the code base. And then I just need to change this reference here. I'm just going to add it to the top. Children example. And we're going to have that. So now we see the children example, some content. Okay, so the thing we want to talk about now, the last bit, is a prop that is called children. Children is not a prop you pass in directly. It's a magical special prop, and it will be enabled. Let me just output it here. See, nothing happens. It's blank right now. So it's not going to complain it doesn't exist because it always exists, or it's just undefined. But it's not going to output anything. So children is used just like in HTML. If you use you can actually see the example here. I have a div here, and inside the div I have these. So these are called children, all of these, because they are children of this parent HTML div, and these are called children. So we can use the same concept in React. If I, instead of having these self-closing components, if I do it like this, which is exactly the same thing as a self-closing component, see there's no change, but then I can type some stuff in here. Hello world. And you will see it gets outputted up here. Whatever I put inside a React component, where I open the component, have some content inside it, and close it, this stuff that is inside it is what is inside the children's prop. So you can use that for whatever you want, and you can input that. When you use the component, you can input any child. So I can make multiple of these. You can also make like complicated stuff. I can put a button in here with some test button. I can put other React components in here. I can put whatever I want. And there's still going to be children, and you can put multiple of these. It's all going to be one prop called children, and you can see that it renders it here. The children example renders it using the children's prop. And what is useful for this? If you had, for instance, let's make a class for this. Class name, child example. So this is CSS class. I have my CSS file here somewhere. There we go. This is just a default. Let me just remove that. Let's just keep that part. So it's still centered. So I just add my class and I can say like border 2 pixels solid black. And we get some padding 20 pixels. And you can see here. So I now have this, I have one component which has a class name, a CSS class, and I just have the children's prop. So imagine this was like a complicated component with some nice design that you want to reuse 100 different places in your application for different things. So you can make these components. You can use the children, and every time I want to use that, let's just add some breaks. Every time I want to use that, I can just use the children's component and I can just put whatever I want inside this as children. And it's going to, all of them are going to have the children's component, whatever I do in here. Could also add like a heading. These are my children. These are my children. And whatever I want to reuse, I can use the children's prop and just pass it in, just like you do in HTML. That is called children. And that's just supported out of the box. You can't do like, maybe you can. I never seen anyone do it. Like you can't like add a boolean, like add a prop and just pass children in. I'm not sure you can. Let's give it a go. See what happens. Nothing happens. Wonder what happens if I do this. Oh, it still works. Please don't do this though. Don't pass it in as a prop. Children is a magical prop, and it's supposed to be used like this. Like whatever you add inside the open and close tag is going to be the children, and you can render that. And you can do whatever you want and render it wherever you want. And this makes it highly reusable for whatever purpose you need. Okay, so that was it for this week. See you in class. Hope you enjoy the videos.